My name is Laura, and I am an addiction advocate, is the best way that I found to put it. I'm doing all of this in hopes of creating a platform to discuss addiction, discuss where it comes from, what causes it, the brain pathways, genetic links, as well as the many, many ways of recovery, societal implications, generational trauma, family support. And by that, I mean the ways to support the family that's going through this, as well as how can the family support someone who is struggling with the disease. I also am hoping to create a platform and a safe space for those who have lost someone in whatever way that might manifest, to share their story, to share who that person was, their personality, their quirks, the good, the bad, share the memories, because these things get missed when people are labeled an addict, and we want to share that story. I also want to invite those who are currently or have struggled with addiction to share their story. What helped, what didn't, uh, who, what kind of supports were there, um, what kind of kicked things off, what kept things going, that kind of thing. What their journey looked like, what they learned, what they lost, all that, just to help drop this stigma a little bit, shine some light on it. And I'm hoping this, like I said, just becomes a safe space for people to share. Um, yeah, with all of that kind of shared, I want to jump right into today's story. Is an anonymous submission. Uh, which I also want to point out is definitely an option. If you are interested in sharing your story, you're welcome to just submit it to me, and I am happy to keep it completely 100% anonymous, so that you have the ability to just kind of share what your story looked like, what your journey was like, because everybody's is different. We may have some similar pieces to it, but they're oftentimes going to still look very different. Um, and I feel like everybody should have a chance to share that. So if you would like to, you're more than welcome to just kind of reach out to me, and I can give you some questions to kind of get you started, some kind of leading points to help you kind of figure out how to help or how to write that up. And then I can kind of share it for you. Uh, you can also do it anonymously by uh, sharing it on here and keeping your video off or whatever. But I want to leave that open. That being said, I will be using the pronoun she and her. Does not indicate that this is a female. It's just the pronouns I've chosen to use this time. Um, I might switch it up between the anonymous ones, between pronouns for he and his, or they and them, depending upon how I feel, uh, between the anonymous ones. But I just want to clarify that I will be using she and hers as a way of just kind of making it a little bit easier for me to work my way through it. That way I'm not constantly saying the person, because then it just gets confusing for me. I'm going to be real honest there. Okay, so all that being said, as always, some trigger warnings, right? Where we're dealing with addiction, we're dealing with drugs, those kinds of things are going to happen. So this is a story that I think a lot of us can relate to, in the fact that it starts out with just a simple surgery. This person had a surgery in their early high school years. It was an early surgery, early oral. It was an oral surgery, so on their teeth and their mouth, and it ended up being a lot of pain, like a lot more pain than they anticipated. And this can happen, right? We end up with a surgery, whether it's a knee surgery, a shoulder surgery, mouth surgery, whatever, and the pain is super severe, whether that's because our nerves were nicked somewhere in the past process, or we just are realizing we're more sensitive to pain, uh, or maybe they just didn't anticipate that this particular surgery would be more painful. Some of us do have more nerve endings in our mouth than others. I don't know. There's some people that go in to get like the X-rays on their mouth in their when they get their regular dental checkups, and they put those little X-ray, those like those little flexible things in your mouth to like, and you're supposed to like hold still, and they're like, this doesn't hurt at all. I can tell you right now, for me, it hurts every time. It is absolutely painful, and I hurt so bad. And I have one younger son that for him, he cries so hard every time. Versus like I go with my husband, doesn't bother him at all. I go with some of my other kiddos, not a problem at all. But for some reason, my one son and I, just so much pain. And I don't know if we just have extra sensitive gums or what it is, but we end up in a lot more pain. So these things happen, right? So this poor thing, she went in for oral surgery and ended up with a lot more pain than they thought, than the doctors predicted, and to the point where they were waking up in the middle of the night, waking up throughout. Usually when you have surgery, you're trying to sleep, and just constantly waking up, uh, just bawling in just excruciating pain. Um, and so, of course, they ended up with opiates prescribed to them, and things kind of snowballed from there. Uh, and it sounds like there is some family history of some addiction, which, as I've said before, and I said it in episode 1 about my sister, and I'll talk more about that when I talk about some pre-existing things that can kind of come into addiction. They are working on figuring out the genetic links there, but generally, if there is a family history, um, it does play a huge part in that. So if there's a family history of some kind of substance use, it seems to increase your likelihood of becoming addicted later on in life. Those of us that have now figured that out are usually a little bit more careful. As I said, for myself, I generally tend to avoid uh, any kind of strong pain medications because now I know that, and I would much rather not go in that direction. But can't say that this person knew that in that moment, right? Um, she took what was prescribed, and I think that's one of the biggest concerns or the biggest problems that a lot of us deal with is that the doctor prescribed it, right? We think it's safe because the doctor prescribed it. They're like, oh, you're in pain, here's a medication, take it, and hopefully you'll feel better. And we think, well, the doctor prescribed it, it must be safe, it must be okay, right? And so we take the medication hoping we'll feel better. And we do, of course, right? We feel better because it does its job. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is that we feel a little bit too good. And then we're addicted. But again, it's this safety thing, right? Where we're not going and getting the drugs off the street. We're not going and getting the alcohol off the shelf at the store. So we feel like it's different. We feel like it's safe because a doctor prescribed it. So we must be doing something right by taking what a doctor prescribed, which is what we're taught most of our lives, right? Well, if they prescribe antibiotics, you're supposed to take them, right? Take them the way the doctor prescribed them, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you better take all of them, right? Or you're going to get sick again. And so we follow doctor's orders. We do what we're supposed to. And unfortunately, there's these consequences that come with it. Same with, mental health meds or physical health meds. We take the insulin because the doctor prescribed it, right? So the concept is, in order to get better, we have to take the meds that the doctor prescribed, and that's supposed to help us. And it, in essence, does. And at the same time, we're not always prepared for the consequences that come with these things that can be addictive. And we don't always understand that. And there's no hate to some of these doctors early on that didn't understand that either, right? Just like mental health professionals and anybody else, we were still kind of learning and figuring that out. Don't get me wrong, there were some doctors out there that took way too much advantage of this. And that's an episode I plan on doing on pain clinics. God help us all. That was a money-making scheme from hell. But I think a good portion of doctors were just trying to do what they needed to do to help us. All of that side rant aside. She was prescribed these. She did what she was supposed to do. She took them, right? Um, and unfortunately, her body got used to them. We enjoy the feeling, so we jump for it and we go for it, right? And like I said, it sounds like there was a little bit of a family history of addiction in there, and it sounds like there was alcoholism and a little bit of opioid use in the family history. But we might not pick that up, or wait, we might not realize that until later on, and then we're like, oh shoot, that would have been good to know. Kind of like, again, an episode when I talked about my sister. I look back now and I see a lot of it. Didn't realize it then, but I see a lot of it now. Um, and I had asked some questions about, like, who do you feel like you were before your addiction, during and after? And so I'll kind of read just their statements. Um, And she says, before my addiction, I was very happy and found interest in a lot of out of the house activities and spending time with friends and family. Sounds like she was a little bit more outgoing. She enjoyed time. She enjoyed hobbies and things like that, and really just kind of got out and about and doing a lot of fun things. Um, and as we've seen with a lot of people, it changes you, right? And I also asked, like, what do you feel like you lost, or who do you feel like you may have lost in this moment? And she said memories of early high school. And it sounds like during this time, because she was in high school and she was using these so often, it sounds like she missed out on a lot, right? And it does affect our memory, especially if we're high most of the time. We don't store those memories, and we don't participate in the same things. If she was super interested in going out and doing a lot of fun things, and then all of a sudden while she's using, she's not able to. What is fuck is going on with this damn camera? It sort of pissed me off, actually. If all of a sudden she's not interested in going out and doing those things, she might have missed out on some of the memories that she could have created. Um, I know I enjoyed quite a bit some of the memories that I made as an early high school student, learning how to drive and then being able to go out to eat with my friends and doing lots of fun things. So not only did she not store a lot of those memories, but she probably didn't get to make as many. So that's something that she probably grieves a lot, which I did ask that question. What do you grieve? And she said, the ability to think, live, and move forward through hard times without cravings. um, I feel like that's true of a lot of us, right? Um, and I talked a lot about this in episode 2, where we talk about um, how the addiction, the dopamine is connected to glutamate, right? Um, and so once we make that connection between this is super great and I love the gumballs that I get, and I'm gonna super remember that, then unfortunately, anytime something comes up that we're like, I really want some dopamine, that glutamate's going to be like, oh yeah, remember how we got that? We got that through the gumball machine, right? Do you remember that gumball machine? Let's go get the gumball machine. So when we're feeling like crap, um, and our life is difficult, or when we're just feeling nothing, maybe when we're in a moment of just not feeling super happy, our brain is going to go back to, I want some dopamine, and I know how to get it, and it's going to crave it. It's going to crave it, and it's going to go, I know how to get that dopamine. I know how to feel better. Just like those of us that crave caffeine, right? We love our caffeine, whether that's coffee or, or soda or whatever, and we're feeling tired. Our brain has locked in that memory of, oh, caffeine helps. I'm going to crave some coffee, or I'm going to crave some soda. Or if it's sugar, I'm going to crave chocolate cake or whatever. It's going to know that sugar is going to help us feel better because it's going to give us energy. Um, Same thing. It's going to start craving that drug. It's going to start craving the opiates. It's going to start craving whatever that is to give us that hit of dopamine. It's going to be like, sweet, I not feeling a whole lot today, or I'm feeling a whole lot of crap, so I want to feel better, and I know what works. And unfortunately, that pathway is so beaten down, and it's easy to use, right? Our brain our brain wants the easy route. Our brain wants the quick route. It doesn't want the it's going to take 6 years to create this new pathway route, right? Which generally doesn't take 6 years to create coping skills. But our brain doesn't want the hard route. It wants the quick one. It wants the easy route. So it's going to jump to, well, I know that this route is only going to take 30 minutes for that pill to kick in and I'm going to feel better. Versus if I have to learn these coping skills that may take a few weeks for me to actually really feel them, I'm going to take the easy route, right? Just like if I want more energy, chances are if I start exercising a little bit, have a better sleep schedule, that'll probably help better than 6 cups of coffee throughout the day, but my brain's going to want the coffee instead because it's a quick fix, right? Same deal. Um, and so we're going to continue to crave those things that are quick fixes. Just it's the way our brain works. Because pathways are created for a reason, because it's created to make things easy for us so that we can find those things easily. They are coping skills that work really well. They just have a lot of really crappy consequences to them. So again, whenever shit hits the fan, we're going to go back to that. I also kind of touched on what do you maybe feel guilty about? And this kind of goes back to her memories of early high school. She said, allowing myself to miss out on a large portion of my teenage years, right? So, and I think this is true of a lot of us that have suffered with addiction. We look back and we realize we missed so much, and that time we can't get back, right? I have a lot of clients that are like, I missed, so many of the important years of my kids' lives, or I missed my grandmother's death and her funeral, or I missed my kid's graduation, or I missed my sister's graduation from college. I missed, you know, I missed my brother's wedding. I missed, and the list goes on and on of these things that we missed. Or as she said, I missed out on my teenage years. A lot of those things, she didn't get a chance to either make those memories, whether that's prom or spring fling or all of those fun dances, as well as, participating in them fully, whether that was, your first job and really enjoying it and kind of getting the memories out of that, and or, making those memories with your friends that you really remember. I still go back to a lot of my memories in high school. I hated high school. High school sucked because I was a geek. and, and I was shuffled off in the corner. But I had friends. I had good friends that I enjoyed my high school years with. And I personally can't imagine not having those memories and those formative times with my friends, because they're part of what made me who I am. And feeling like you missed out on that time could cause a lot of grief and regret, because it's a really formative time for you. You figure out a lot about who you are, a lot about what you're interested in life. You figure a lot about independence. You learn a lot about how to gain acceptance from other people. Teenage development, adolescent development is incredibly important. And a lot of kids start their addiction around this time. It's actually really common. I have a lot of clients where I ask them, what was your age of first use? And a lot of them will tell you 11, 12, 13. That's probably the most common ages I get. And adolescence is a really important time, like I said, to build independence, to build peer acceptance or not, to figure out who you are, figure out what you want in life. And that continues to build upon itself in early adulthood. So if some of that is missed in adolescence, those early adulthood years can be even more difficult in figuring out who you are and what you want to make your life into, right? Because those early adulthood years are figuring out even more of who you are and maybe your career path and things like that. And if this part is missed in development, it can create even more of a lapse in that development situation. If I'm hoping that makes sense. Maybe I should do an episode on that so that helps. So that makes a little bit more sense. But so I can only imagine how her life might have been in early adulthood years, trying to understand and trying to make sense of life without some of this piece in there. And I would hope that maybe she has some good friends that can kind of come back and be like, "Oh, this is what happened," kind of give her some stories. But it's not the same as like that firsthand experience, like I said. Um, and the way she puts this is so painful to see. Allowing myself, right, because she is taking accountability, right, and the fact that this was a choice that I made, right. This was my decision. I continued to do this. And I allowed myself to miss out on these things, which is incredibly painful. And also something that she's going to have to work on because it's going to hurt for a long time. Um, and as I said, like what were you like before, during, and after your addiction? Her statement of um, during my addiction, I honestly don't remember much. I was taking 4 to 5, the prescribed amount of Percocet at 15 years old, which is a lot. 4 to 5 times the prescribed amount. That's a lot. Percocet is pretty strong. Um, I personally don't like Percocet. It makes me very, very sick. The few times that I've taken it, I think the one time I took it was my wisdom teeth, which might have been the oral surgery she's talking about, but I had my wisdom teeth removed at 16, 16, I want to say. It was right after I got my braces off. And they gave me Percocet, and it made me very, very sick. No, Lortab makes me sick. Percocet puts me to sleep. I was out cold for like 4 days. I was gone to the world. um, so during my addiction, I honestly don't remember much. I was taking 4 to 5 times the prescribed amount of Percocet at 15 years old. So, I mean, similar. I guess if it knocked me on my butt, I can only imagine what that was like for her. She probably wasn't really aware. I know I'd become very introverted and depressed even when I was high. I remember more towards the end of the last refill I had. I had taken 5 pills that night and took a sixth to get just a little bit more. The next morning, I woke up and looked at myself in the mirror, and my lips were slightly tinted blue, and that scared me. I looked in the bottle and saw that I had 4 pills left and decided that I needed to buckle down and quit. That night, I didn't take any. The next day, I was very sick and caved and took all 4. I decided to go cold turkey. I do not remember withdrawals, much other than the sweats and constantly throwing up for like a week. Um, I wanted to let that sit in for a second. The introverted and depressed, I could definitely see. Um, the withdrawals from opiates suck. They come with a lot of depression. They come with a lot of depression. And so as you're kind of coming on and off of these medications, I could see that creating a lot of depression. Also, like, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame with it. Once we realize we're taking more than we should and things like that, whether we're fully aware of it or not, we tend to get a lot of shame. And so that depression slips in. Sounds like, she says slightly tinted blue. I don't know if she was on the verge of a possible overdose, but it sounds like that was a possibility. Um, that whole took a six just to get a little bit more. So many people do that, right? And opiates come with just that likelihood of overdose. And it's so popular, which is also why I carry naloxone with me at all times. Um, I have it in my car. I have it in my purse, in my backpack. I have it in my first aid kit. Um, it is literally on me at all times because it's just so likely, right? Um, and I think that happens so often to those who have used opiates, heroin, any of the ones. It's like I'm not quite high enough, so I'm just going to take just a little bit more, and it's just enough to push you over the edge, right? And it sounds like that. It's one of those moments that thank God she didn't take a seventh, right? It's a little too scary, little too close for comfort for me, and it sounds like for her as well. Um, and it sounds like that was her breaking point, which everybody kind of finds eventually. Well, I don't want to say eventually because some people don't. Um, unfortunately, before it does take their lives. Some people do, thank God, but not everybody does find that breaking point. And the concept is she's like, I'm going to buckle down, I'm going to do this, and then still kind of falls back and takes them. Again, such a common thing, because like, we can want so badly to quit, but those cravings are so hard to deal with, especially if you know you've got them. Anybody who's tried to quit smoking and is like, oh, I'll just keep this pack just in case. Good luck with that. Same thing. It's just, it doesn't work that way, right? Um, Same with anybody who's trying to cut back on soda and they still have an entire 12 pack in the fridge. It doesn't work, right? Um, and the whole I took all four, I could see that, right? It's like, again, anybody who tries to cut back, anybody who's ever tried to diet can kind of understand this, right? Where they're like, I'm going to cut back on sugar and I'm going to do so well, and I'm going to try and uh, I'm going to try and cut all the sugar out, right? And so you cut all the sugar out of your diet, and by like the third day, you're binge eating a large chocolate cake, right? Because your body's like, fuck that, we're going to eat all the cake in the world, right? So definitely makes sense, right? Because you've just deprived yourself of the one thing that's making you feel better. And so like your entire world, like, no, we're not doing that. And so your body's going to get very angry. And the withdrawals she describes sound very similar. The sweats, throwing up, those are very, very common. I plan on doing an episode on withdrawals for different things, but very common. I dealt with that a lot when I worked at the detox center. Lot of nausea, a lot of vomiting. Sweats are very common. Sweating, very common. You will feel like you're dying coming off of opiates. It sucks. I just feel awful for people coming off opiates, because it feels like hell. You're going through hell. That's what it feels like. And then she speaks to afterwards. She says, after the height of my addiction, I am still very introverted and struggle with severe depression and anxiety. The cravings and thoughts are always there and occasionally take over my mind to the point where I want to break my sobriety. It's a constant fight, and I strive to fight my hardest every single day to beat the cravings. And I feel like that's just everybody who deals with addiction. That's why I always say once in recovery, always in recovery, because it just because you get sober does not mean it's going to be there forever, and it does not mean that all of a sudden the cravings and the triggers and all of that goes away. It's still there. Like I said, the pathway's built, and so when shit hits the fan, your brain's going to go, oh, I know this super easy pathway. I know this super easy way to make things feel better. And you're going to want to go there. And unfortunately, our brain has the ability to heal, but it doesn't take away the damage that was done during the addiction. We're likely still going to walk away with some damage, whether that's physical damage from what the drugs may have done to our body, but also the emotional damage of what happened during it. That includes shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, PTSD. All of these things can come from it, which oftentimes then increases the likelihood of going back, right? If we have trauma from use, because if we started using and then because we were using, we ended up in some dangerous situations, we ended up with trauma, then the easiest way to cope with the trauma is to use. So then we use, and it's this beautiful little cycle that really, really sucks. Same with depression, right? We end up with depression because of the way the drugs mess with our chemicals in our brain. And then the easiest way to deal with the depression is to use. And again, it's a cycle. So not uncommon. It doesn't make it any less crappy. And it sucks that now she's got to deal with the loss of all of these beautiful memories that she could have made, the loss of this development during her adolescent years, the loss of maybe some of her mental health that she could have had otherwise, and the add-on of some of these mental health struggles and these triggers and these cravings that she'll now have going forward. And I didn't ask about her support system now, which I should have. I'll keep that in mind for the next anonymous one that I intend to do. But as you can see, it's not that hard. I don't know how long this took her to write up, but I want to keep this as an open option for those who might want to share their story. Like you said, this was a very common situation where it just started out with surgery and they went on. And she was 15 years old, right? Um, very common. So being anonymous, absolutely an option. Um, yeah. Um, and like I said, I just kind of wrote up a couple questions for her. It was like, who or what have you lost in the process? What did your addiction look like? Where did it come from? What caused it? What did your family history look like? What were you like before, during, after? What do you grieve? What do you have some shame about? Again, I probably should have put something in there about support, but something to keep in mind in the future. We're learning, we're adjusting, figuring it out. Um, but yeah, pretty simple way of just being involved without having to get your name out there, because I do understand, again, the shame that's involved in it. Yeah. Addiction is often buried because there is so much shame attached for everyone involved. Let's shed some light, even if it is anonymously, to get it out there. Let's make these conversations loud and share our stories so society can see addicts as people and understand our loss, our stories, our stresses, our concerns. Let's help everybody understand. Make sure to subscribe, and if you would like to share your story or if you have suggestions for topics to cover, if something popped up and you're like, oh, that would be great, I would love to understand more about X, Y, and Z, please go ahead and feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook at A Family Addiction. I have a page there. Or you can email me. Wow, let's combine 4 words there. At afamilyaddiction@gmail.com. Yeah, share your story. Tell me your story. Let's open up this line. Thank you for listening.